You need 1 pound of zucchini, and just use your box grater and grate the zucchini. There, that's good. Now, zucchini is a wet vegetable, and you want to try to get as much moisture out of this zucchini as possible. So what I'm going to do is just put it all into a cloth, and we'll just let that sit for a second until the juices start to run, and then squeeze. And while we're waiting for that, you can start the rest of the muffin. Melted butter, 3/4 of a cup, and 3 large eggs, and 1½ cups of granulated sugar. And this is another muffin that's easily made by hand without an electric mixer. You can just make it in a bowl. Stir well until incorporated. And to this, add the zest of 1 bright orange. And you just want the outside bright skin of the orange when you're zesting. And squeeze the juice too. And we just need a tablespoon, so just sort of eyeball it. So those are our wet ingredients. Simple, fragrant, really fragrant. It just smells delicious. Now for our dry ingredients. 2½ cups of unbleached all-purpose white flour. 2½ teaspoons of baking powder. You might say, oh, why so much? Well, you remember we're having zucchini. It's sort of a heavy addition to the batter. That's why you need a little bit more leavening. And some other interesting ingredients. 1/4 teaspoon of anise seed, 1/4 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, ground cardamom from cardamom seed pods. Mix these together. So we now have our dry ingredients. Now we have to squeeze our zucchini. Now watch this, just twist the cloth. I remember doing this as a child for my mother. When we made cabbage pierogi, we would squeeze the steamed cabbage and get all the moisture out of it. So that's enough, I think. Now this can go right into your wet ingredients. This same recipe actually can be adapted to other kinds of squash. You can also use carrot. And now add your dry ingredients. Makes a nice batter. And if you notice, the muffins that we're making on this show all have a little bit of a twist. A topping, a sprinkling, a spice. Makes a much more interesting muffin. So these are now ready to spoon into our papers. Just pieces of parchment paper folded like a tulip cup. So use a 1/2 cup ice cream scoop and gently drop the batter down into the paper. And this should make 10 muffins. Make sure your oven is preheated, 325 degrees, and bake for about 25 minutes. This zucchini muffin has a sugar glaze made out of powdered sugar, orange juice, and orange zest. And you'll want about a tablespoon of glaze on top of each of these beautiful muffins. And I also like to garnish with a little piece of chervil. This is a great late summer muffin when you have way too much zucchini in your garden and don't know what to do with it. Make the best homemade carrot muffins. They're spicy and they are really, really good. I like them for breakfast with a cup of tea. Children love eating them when they get home from school. And the recipe is sort of clever because you can make the batter, put the batter into muffin papers like this, and then put the whole thing into the freezer, well wrapped of course, and you can pop them into the oven when you want fresh muffins. The recipe's from our January-February issue of Everyday Food. Whisk together 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, a 1/2 cup of sugar, and if you use the whisk, you don't have to sift. This breaks up all the lumps. 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice. This is a spice that you can make yourself. It's a mixture of cinnamon, cloves, ginger, nutmeg, and allspice. 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And make sure you have fresh baking powder. And 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda. because we're using a little bit of yogurt in this recipe. And oh, don't forget half a teaspoon of salt. And whisk this up. And in a separate bowl, whisk together 1 1/4 cups of yogurt. I like, when I bake, to use plain, regular yogurt. If you're on a diet, you can use low fat. If you happen to have vanilla yogurt, you could use that. But I like plain yogurt. Why glop it up with anything else? So we need 1 1/4 cups. 4 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter. We've already melted it. And 2 large eggs. You can break the eggs into a separate bowl first just to make sure they're okay. So every now and then you might get a bad egg. If you're worried about that, break your eggs first, then add all the other ingredients, because that bad egg can ruin a cake. So mix this all up together like that. And then add this to your flour. Just make a well right there. And pour all your liquid ingredients in. And you can stir it with a spoon or a spatula or whatever. Isn't it nice to make muffins by hand? So it's a nice, rich batter. Now add your carrots, so it's 2 cups. If you have a food processor, you can grate your carrots very, very quickly in the food processor. And if you're making a lot of muffins, that might help you a lot. But this has such a nice texture with the hand-grated carrots. Carrots are high in vitamin A, beta-carotene, very nice. And they add a lot of fiber to these muffins. You could add a little bran to the muffins if you want. And this is a good yogurt-based recipe, which you can add other things. So you could turn this, just change the carrots to zucchini. Delicious. Mashed bananas. Delicious. And so now you spoon or scoop the batter into your prepared muffin tins. Now I like cooking in the paper because each muffin is individual. You don't really mess up your pans. You have less cleanup. And this recipe makes 12 lovely muffins. This scoop is about 1/3 of a cup in size. And if you want to bake these immediately because your family is standing around looking at you with their mouths watering, preheat your oven at 375 and bake them until they are a nice golden brown on the top, about 20 to 25 minutes if they're not frozen. And if they're frozen, bake them for about 35 minutes in a preheated oven. So I'm going to put 1 pan of muffins into the oven, 375. And the other, because I can't wait to have them, and the other pan I'm going to put into the freezer just till they get hard. And as soon as they are, I'm going to wrap them really well. And so tomorrow I can have muffins again, and I don't have to go through the process. So here's another really delicious muffin, fruit-filled coffee cake muffins, topped with a sprinkling of cinnamon and sugar. These muffins are hard to resist. I chose a nice, firm, ripe Santa Rosa plum. They're kind of sour sweet with a red skin, and just cut it up, 3 plums, we'll save those. And right in the bowl here, your dry ingredients, 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And if you store your flour in a glass container like this, it's very easy to dip in and measure. 3/4 of a cup of granulated sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1 tablespoon of baking powder. And sift this with your wire whisk. Very easy. And oh, just a large pinch of freshly grated nutmeg. That's a large pinch. And now into this bowl, 2 eggs. I need large eggs. And you can whisk these with 3/4 of a cup of milk and 1 teaspoon of vanilla and 1/2 cup of melted butter, melted and cooled. And always keep your ingredients at room temperature. Hot butter into icy cold flour, it will lump and you won't be happy with the result. Okay, so this is your batter. Now you can add the wet to the dry. Just stir it in. This makes a nice cakey batter. So it stirs very nicely. It does not have to be particularly smooth. And this is about 2 tablespoons of batter into our papers. Papers are very handy because you don't have to butter, you don't have to spray. It doesn't add any additional calories to your muffin. And there's very little cleanup. So now, plums. You can use a spoon or your fingers to drop plums right into each of the 12 papers. It calls for 3 plums chopped. And now use up the rest of the batter. Now your oven should be preheating at this point at 375 degrees. And the muffins will cook for about 15 to 17 minutes. So now in a little bowl, just put 2 tablespoons of sugar and 1/4 of a teaspoon of cinnamon. And just sprinkle atop. Cinnamon goes very nicely with plums. And this is going to be your little plum coffee cake. Very nice for a brunch, really, really nice with a cappuccino for breakfast, or just as a special after-school treat. So pop those into your 375-degree oven. Set your timer for 16 minutes. So once these are cooled, you can remove them from the muffin tin, and they really do look pretty. I think these are beautiful looking muffins. This one is never going to get to my table because I am going to show you what it looks like when you peel the paper off and break this in half. What a lovely muffin full of delicious fruit. So here we go. Very easy. Cream 1½ sticks of unsalted butter at room temperature. Start this. And cream the 1½ sticks of butter with 1 cup of granulated sugar. Just cream while you get your dry ingredients ready. And it is 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Whisk it a little bit. This is another way to sift. You can use a strainer, you can use a sifter, or you could use a whisk. 1 teaspoon of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Don't forget the salt. So those are our dry ingredients. To this, we're going to add 2 large eggs and 2 egg yolks. So if you have a little container for the egg whites, you can use these for an angel food cake or for an icing or something. Just 2 egg yolks. Oh, what beautiful, beautiful eggs. Thank you so much, chickens. We have a big flock of chickens here in Bedford on my farm, and they have been providing us with the most extraordinary eggs. And 1 teaspoon of this very good vanilla. Nice and fluffy, very good. We need 2/3 of a cup of the creme fraiche. And this will be added alternately with the dry ingredients. And just get that mixed up really well. Don't overbeat. And there. That's your batter. And just give it one last little stir with a rubber scraper. It's a little bit heavier than a cake batter, but that's because it's a muffin, and it will hold up very nicely in the little paper cups that we're going to bake it in. Very nice. And now we have to quickly make the crumb topping for our muffins. We have 1.5 cups all-purpose flour, a 1/2 cup of light brown sugar, and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 3/4 teaspoon of good cinnamon. And this is a crumb topping that utilizes melted butter. 1/4 pound of melted unsalted butter. So that's our crumb topping. Let it sit until the butter is absorbed into the dry ingredients. And these papers are called panettone papers, and they're available at cake supply stores, baking supply stores. These are great. And they really are very pretty, and they make the muffin a gift rather than just a muffin. So I have strawberry jam here. These are wonderful jams with whole strawberries. And I have a black raspberry jam. So here, black raspberry and strawberry. So now we can fill our papers and use a ice cream scoop. Really makes this job very easy. Use about a 1 ounce scoop. So you put 2 scoops in here. If you're not used to using ice cream scoops like this, it makes it so easy. It's great for cookies, for cupcakes, for muffins. Really saves a lot of time and a lot of mess. And a heaping teaspoon of your favorite jam. There. So I'll do some with black raspberry and some with strawberry. Oh, yummy. Strawberries right from my garden. And then the crumb topping. 1 heaping tablespoon in each. Fill all your papers, and then put your muffins right into a 325-degree oven and set your timer for 20 minutes. Let them cool on a rack, and you're going to have the most delicious crumb-topped muffins you have ever tasted. This next recipe is the healthy morning muffins. So we're going to start with the dry ingredients. 2.5 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of baking powder. I'm going to sift right here in this bowl, and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And at this time, you can add your nutmeg, freshly grated nutmeg. And we need 1 teaspoon. So much better to grate your own nutmeg. It's one of those fantastic spices that really adds a depth of flavor to anything that it's used in. And nutmeg is really 2 spices in one. It's covered with a little orange web when you find it. That's mace. And you take the mace off and grind that. And you then are left with the nutmeg itself, and you grind that. So here we have very flavorful nutmeg. And to this, add 1 3/4 cups of rolled oats. Don't use instant oats. It's the rolled oats that you want. These will hold their shape and taste crunchy in the final muffin. Stir these in, and then add 1 cup of dark brown sugar. Dark brown sugar dries out really fast, so use it immediately. To reconstitute brown sugars, light or dark, you can put the sugar in a plastic bag and put like a 1/2 of an apple in the bag. The moisture from the apple will actually re-moisturize the brown sugar. It works like magic. So there, we have this done. And now add 1 cup of plump raisins. I love these golden raisins. The reason I'm using them today is because look at the size, look at the color, and they're moist. If the raisins you have are dry, you can mix them with a little bit of boiling water to plump them up. You could even use orange juice, which I prefer. So there. We have to grate the carrots. We need 3 cups of grated carrot. Peel your carrot first and then grate. And I think we have 3 cups here. Yes. We need 2 eggs, 2/3 cup of skim milk, And this you can just add to your eggs. 6 tablespoons of really good olive oil. Instead of butter in the batter, olive oil. Olive oil keeps these muffins really moist and very flavorful. So 6 tablespoons olive oil. So now add your carrot. If you don't have carrot, you could add zucchini. So now add bananas. Bananas are really nice in a muffin like this, and kids love them. Now notice I'm using freckled bananas. Don't use bananas that are totally black. They are fermented and they will taste fermented in your muffin. A lot of people think that you have to have them black to be ripe. So you can squish them with an old-fashioned potato masher like this. Or you can use a fork. And you want some lumps. Don't get it totally lumpless. Very tasty. So mix this up and then add your wet ingredients. Here you go. And stir this up with either a wooden spoon or a rubber scraper. And keep stirring, keep mixing until it's all incorporated. Okay, so this is nicely mixed. Time to fill the muffin papers. Now this is another way to bake muffins without a muffin tin. I love these papers. They're really charming and they look very professional when you serve the muffins in a container like this. I'm using a 1/2 cup ice cream scoop so that I don't make a mess. So fill each one with a 1/2 cup first, and then you'll go back and use up the rest of the batter. This recipe makes 10 of these. Now at this point you should preheat your oven. It should be preheated already, by the way, at 400 degrees. And these muffins, because they're so hearty and have so many ingredients, will take about 25 minutes to bake. Now sprinkle a little bit of old-fashioned oats. This is a 1/4 cup, and I'll just sprinkle the tops. These will adhere to the batter nicely during baking and look pretty. Okay, 400 degrees, approximately 25 minutes. Set your timer. This is a very nice way to kickstart your day. Just peel off the paper and look what emerges. A really, really pretty muffin. Hefty, healthy, tasty, great for you and your family.